Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Live with Ty. Better for
We all know him pretty well.
And you guys are so excited. I was thinking,
Live with Ty starts now.
I can say my illustrious soccer career ended when I was in second grade and was playing on a second, third grade team, and all the third graders made fun of me and told me I was bad, and I decided that was it. My parents do tell a story about in t-ball, I think I was playing t-ball, and my mom looked at my dad and was like, well, at least he's doing well in school. This doesn't seem too promising.
Baseball players, the scariest people, pitchers especially, the scariest people to ever play against. Because I don't know what it is about your guys' arm, the way you guys throw it, the mechanics behind it, it just makes you guys lethal. Did you have any experiences where you're like, man, you're playing dodge, but you took that kid's head off, you're like, you know what, this is gonna get me to Harvard. Welcome back, guys. This is episode 2 of the Digital Live with Ty series. Joining us today is former vice president of one of the departments within BlackRock, Ian. He's a boy, he has the sickest beard ever. We're gonna wait for him to join on. Again, it should be another phenomenal episode. You know, one thing that is shocking to me about you guys as an audience is that 90% of you guys who watch this content aren't subscribed. Again, if you guys want to be part of this community, have an actual input in who you want me to interview, who you want me to bring on the show, which stories are you looking to hear more, what content do you want to see, subscribe and let me know. Be a part of this journey of creativity, of professionalism, and again, craziness. You don't know what's going to happen on Live with Ty. Also, for my team watching out there, I want to say congrats on your Emmy Award. Yes, this show was Emmy nominated, and we won the award. I was not at the award show to pick up the prize, but we got it done. It was such a pleasure working with all of you guys. And again, more awards to come as we take the show and start running with it more and more. But again, I need your input. So like, comment, subscribe, be a part of that conversation, be a part of that journey of the Live with Ty series. Once Ian joins up, we're going to hop right into it. And we're just going to explore. He is super well versed in just about everything. I can't wait. I'm so excited. And he's here.
I'm here. Sorry.
Hey, what's up, Ian? How are you, man?
Good. How are you?
I'm doing good. You know, I was just telling the people, every single time I see you, your beard gets more and more full, and I get more and more jealous. No, seriously, it's crazy. I actually had to shave this little patch there today, and it was a sad experience because I never can get it right. What's your secret? Tell me.
Yeah, I don't know. It was born with it, and just don't shave for a long time, and then when the wife starts yelling at me, I start over again.
I was looking at you from your college years, and you were kind of clean shaven like me. When did you make the transition over?
Oh, once you leave the East Coast, the formal confines of Harvard, you start to loosen up a little bit when you get back to the West Coast.
Did you have, let's say, a similar experience? Because you grew up in Seattle, right?
Yeah.
You grew up in Seattle. When you moved over and you were at Harvard, did you kind of have some similar feelings? Let's say, why did I do this? The weather was so much better, or like I missed the West Coast so much when you were during your time in the East Coast.
Oh man, realistically, I was not super happy first year over there. Definitely. Oh man, it was a lot of things. I was like a little young. I wasn't super young, but I was like maybe a year-ish young for my grade, and so I think I was just kind of like getting into the swing of things in high school, and the whole college experience, regardless of where it was going to be a little bit of a jump. And yeah, just super different environment going from Seattle to like the kind of most East Coast kind of old tradition type environment that you can get to.
Did you always have your eyes, let's say, set on Harvard? I know your dad went there as well, but or was it just kind of happened? What was that process like?
Maybe something in between. I mean, it's not like, growing up with someone who kind of wants to go to a good school, play sports. It's certainly not a name that you've never heard of before. But
I feel like everybody's heard of it,
Yeah. It wasn't like something I'd always thought about. grown up. And I mean, some of the people I played with actually, they kind of had that story, which was really cool. But for me, it was like it happened to work out as a place that I could play baseball and study at, and it's a hard thing to say no to. So when that opportunity
Yeah.
did come, it was great. But yeah, it wasn't like I had my heart set on it from the beginning or anything.
Yeah, I got you. So you grew up playing baseball. What was your journey kind of into that sport? And then the second question I want to know is that when did you kind of see that alignment with the education being like, okay, that education is going to be the vehicle to fuel my athletic endeavors?
Yeah, it certainly was the fuel. I mean,
Okay.
I don't know how kind of athletic admissions work now at Harvard, and in the Ivy League in general. But back in the day, you kind of had to meet your average kind of like test scores and GPA, et
Okay.
cetera, with your incoming class. So I was definitely one of the kids that like, they were like, he can play okay. I don't know if we really need him, but he's really going to help us get this other guy in. So,
Okay,
so it certainly, to that extent, it certainly was the fuel that let me keep playing baseball. But yeah, I think, path to playing baseball. I think like a lot of kids, I grew up playing a bunch of different sports, which was really fortunate that I was able to kind of sample all of those.
Yeah, get your like taste everything, Try
Yep,
before you buy a little bit.
a little bit. I can say my illustrious soccer career ended when I was in second grade and was playing on a third grade team, and all the third graders made fun of me and told me I was bad, and I decided that was it for soccer.
But you decided I want to hit things, and then you're like, let's pick up a bat, and you go from there. That's a good transition.
Something like that. I wasn't very fast and really couldn't kick very well, so that was kind of the end of it for me. But no, baseball was always it was always really fun for me. Although my parents do tell a story about in T-ball, I think I was playing T-ball and my mom looked at my dad and was like, well, at least he's like doing well in school. This doesn't seem too promising. But fortunately that turned around a little bit. I guess I was a pitcher, so I probably still, T-ball was not highlighting my strengths.
Definitely. Was there like a level or maybe an age where you started to see like, I can maybe take this a little bit further than from what you just told me, maybe your parents thought you could? You're like, hey, I'm gonna prove you guys wrong.
Yeah. I would say my parents were very supportive. That was not something that they ever told me when I was, a real conscious human, just when I was a little kid playing T-ball. Kept that from me. But no, I don't think there was a strong moment. Although I do say kind of like partway through high school, I mean, everybody, especially pitchers, I think sometimes go through these like step changes, like, oh, you change something, or just, you're growing up and your body changes and you start throwing a few miles an hour harder or something like that. So I had kind of like one of those step changes towards the end of high school. So at that point it was kind of like I was already knew where I was going to college, but that made me think that I, would be able to compete at that next level. I was one of those kids that, has ambitions that far exceed their demonstrated skill levels. So I was one of those people that was like, hitting off a tee in my backyard, being like, all right, I'm gonna play in the major leagues at some point. Like this is how it works.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that was always there. But there wasn't really a turning point, other than a few times when you kind of like gain a step change in skills just through like growing up and going through puberty and whatnot.
Yeah. One thing that, again, this is like probably a little bit off topic, is that, so growing up, at least for me, my brother always had an arm, right? My brother always had an arm where I would say, again, you can tell me if this is if this is like a good qualitative measure or if it's crap. Let me know. So let's say in 6th grade or 7th grade, he was throwing like 70 miles per hour. I just remember that's pretty fast. But the thing I want to talk about is that baseball players specifically, in this camp, we would always play dodgeball. Oh my goodness. Baseball players, the scariest people, pitchers especially, the scariest people to ever play against. Because I don't know what it is about your guys' arm, you're like the way you guys throw it, you're like the mechanics behind it. It just makes you guys lethal. Did you have any experiences where you're like, man, you're playing dodgeball, you took that kid's head off, you're like, you know what? This is gonna get me to Harvard.
Oh man, I don't know. Dodgeball
It's a thing with
certainly.
baseball players, though. I don't know what it is, but it
Oh,
is
I
a
mean,
thing.
yeah, it's just like, yeah, you see someone throwing who hasn't played baseball or football before, and you're kind of like, oh yeah, there's a clear difference there when you it's not a motion you go through in your everyday life too often, but when you have to do it 100, 200 times a day, then things start to change a little bit. But yeah, I think I could pick some kids off in dodgeball pretty good.
Okay. Well, hopefully those kids are still with us and they'll watch this episode. When you made that transition into Harvard, so you're on the baseball team now. That
Mhm.
first year, what was that experience like? At least for me, it's always a big culture shock. It was a massive culture shock when I came here to play at BU on the soccer team. I want to know, what was that experience like for you those years ago?
It was definitely a shock. And then one other kind of piece to my story is that I started to get some elbow problems like the summer after senior year of high school. So as soon
Wow.
as I got into college, I was kind of battling this injury thing, which kind of persisted throughout my
Yeah,
college
that's how it
career,
goes
and
sometimes.
ultimately was kind of the final blow.
Mhm.
But so that was part of the, like, just from a purely baseball standpoint, that was part of the transition to
Yeah,
college. But even kind of beyond that, it was just, I mean, obviously it's a different level. Like,
completely.
you play against some pretty good teams in I mean in high school, but also especially in club, like summer club teams. I imagine kind of there's similar stuff with soccer as well. Like
Yeah, same exact
you
thing.
start to get to that competition, but then all of a sudden, everybody's up to 3 or 4 years older than you,
Mm.
and so there's still some, you're still growing, you're kind of thrust into that level. And I think you just kind of, yeah, you pick off the better players from each of those teams, so you're competing against someone a little bit more. The whole field is a little bit stronger. So there was that, and there's also just kind of the structure of our practices ended up being quite different. I remember
Yeah,
in
tell me
high
about that.
school, yeah, I mean in high school, like every day that would be what I'd look forward to, is like going to practice
Okay.
after school.
It
And I think
changes in college.
it changes. I mean, it's
It
still fun
changes.
for sure, but like it's a lot of work,
Yeah.
and it's not always quite the same, especially when you're, in high school. For a lot of the people that do end up getting the opportunity to play in college, like you're kind of one of the better players. You're often kind of leader on that team, and then like showing up and really trying to battle just to be like, all right, maybe I can get an inning in here or there. Was for me. I mean, obviously some people come in and are superstars, but it was
Mhm.
just a different experience. Also, playing in a bubble when it's like 10 degrees outside,
Yeah. Well,
bubble
dude,
over
at
the
least you
football
guys have
stadium.
a
I know,
bubble, man.
I
We gotta
know
get
that
one here on Comm
that happened. I think sophomore year. So freshman year, we were still in our like the track and field, like little field house area. You could put up some batting cages, but it wasn't much. And then finally, they put the bubble up, and that was pretty nice.
So when you were, let's say, kind of coming to find yourself those first years, I'll say at the Crimson. I don't know. I'm going to be used to saying Harvard just feels a little bit weird coming off the tongue. So I'll say the Crimson, right? Did you
Okay.
see, I guess, almost like because now you can reflect on it, kind of some, let's say, qualities or some things that you can look back and kind of be grateful on, or was it kind of a different experience for you when you were on that baseball team? Like, what was it
You
like
mean?
being in the locker room with teammates? I want to know all that.
Oh yeah, you mean in terms of baseball in particular?
Yeah,
I mean, I don't have another college team experience to compare it to, but that is kind of a different, and also a cool part of the transition. Like
yeah.
you don't really have like when you play on your summer team in high school, you don't have locker rooms. You're kind of just, you show up there, and even in high school, like you hang out with people during the day, but it's not quite the same level of time that you're spending with everyone. And kind of as you get to college, you're spending more time practicing, but you're also oftentimes you're living with people. Like I lived with other teammates as well, and so that experience is something that really changes, and I think I value a lot. Some people I'm still really close with, some people I'm not, but even those I'm not, like during that time, the ability to kind of like eat, sleep, and breathe the same stuff with a
Yeah.
group of people, you develop some shared memories, and that are pretty unique.
And from a personal curiosity point, so I just ended, right, like my collegiate career. I like to say I'm recently
Yeah.
retired, right?
Yeah.
And my hips messed up, so I have the injury story. We can connect on that as well. Um, do you feel like, because something that I've talked to some older alumni, something that they're always saying is that the off the field moments are what they look back and remember the most. And I haven't really had much conversation with people where that can also attest to that, So I want to ask you that question. When you look back at your 4 years from a baseball perspective, what are some of the things that stick out to you the most? Like, yeah.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, the amount of time you spend on the baseball field is is a small portion, and I think it also varies just kind of like the kind of direction that the team goes and kind of how far you go. Like we struggled a little bit while I was there for sure. I think we didn't by any means meet the expectations that we'd hoped to. So we didn't quite have those kind of like defining moments where everybody's hard work gets validated with a
Gosh, yeah.
championship or something like that. And I think that could obviously, I mean, that's something that sticks with you, I'm sure. So for us, it was like a lot of the time spent in practice and also just, living with the folks that you're competing with every day. I think that's true. My memories, I can't speak to specific times right now. Maybe you can't speak to anything in public.
It's hard.
Sometimes
I feel like
sometimes the stories gotta stay buried, but no, there's some good times.
Yeah, not on air. We can collect offline about those.
Yeah.
What I was gonna say is that, so I can definitely relate to the job component, right? And something I'm curious to know about, when you come into a student athlete, for me, and again, it might be for you, but it's almost like your coach is like this father figure, right? So all you want to do is please your coach and do whatever he wants to make you happy, because you make the coach happy, you might get in the game, right? So, but again, you're there from a student athlete perspective. And at a school like Harvard, the academic gravitas that a university like that holds, it can't be denied, right? So how did your athletic community or athletic experience brush up against, let's say, some of your academic experience? And we'll get into some of that later, but I want to know, was there a little bit of that crossover, or was it like two separate worlds?
Yeah, and when you kind of started off with talking about kind of a coach and that relationship, are you specifically talking about kind of how does your kind of pressure from the coaching standpoint line up with academic expectations?
Yeah, exactly. Like I'll give you
Yeah.
an example where it's like,
Yeah.
my coach was never pressing me saying, what internships do you have? He was saying, what summer team are you playing on? So all I cared about until I tore my hip was, I want to play on a summer team. It was when I got injured, I was like, oh, I probably should maybe get an internship. But that never crossed my mind, because that wasn't on his mind, and all I wanted to do was make him happy. Make him happy, So yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot of overlap there. It certainly kind of wasn't the job of our coaching team to like support kind of academic or non-baseball related career movement. And that's not to say that they got in the way of that. They certainly weren't like pushing for things that hampered that. And especially at a place like Harvard, and I'm sure BU is similar, like they recognize that sometimes, you'd have finals or other things that would get in the way of a practice or something like that. So that did come up a lot.
Okay.
That being said, they weren't trying to structure. They weren't trying to go outside of the athletic coaching realm into kind of more of a like holistic coaching side. And I think some coaches do, some coaches don't. That's kind of a different perspective. But for me, that was, I think I maintained a pretty substantial like outside of sports community at Harvard, and that was really important for me. Part of that, I mean, honestly, part of that is just because I was injured for most of my time there, and so kind of by necessity, I was trying to find. I mean, it was a little hard. I think everybody, a lot of athletes that play in college, that is like a big part of their identity, and so for me, there was a little bit of struggle there as I was hurt more and more and playing less and less. It was like kind of, all right, well, what do I do now?
The identity crisis.
Yeah, I mean, there's tons of stuff as a college student and good place to go to school. Like, there was tons of opportunity. It just took me a little bit to get over the fact that like, all right, maybe this is not something that I'm going to get to do for another decade or so. This is something I need to kind of start to think about other things. So having that other community and a few different other communities at Harvard, I think was really helpful for me to get some of that perspective that wasn't necessarily coming from the baseball team, just because we were focused on baseball, and that's kind of the way our program worked.
Got you. So in a weird, because I can relate with that super similar, because my junior year when I was out with my injury, I always kind of felt a little bit ostracized where I could go to practice and just kind of sit and watch and feel even more sad, right? Because I'm like, man, I want to be out there. But also I was able to kind of tap into a big community. So in a weird way, it almost seems like the athletic community, when you're kind of seeing that door close, that's kind of when you kind of develop the skills to be very versatile and find success in other areas, right? Correct me if I'm wrong on that.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I think that's totally true. I think there are ways to be a little bit more proactive about that.
Okay.
But I think for a lot of us, playing sports competitively takes a lot of focus and attention, and so you don't have the time to necessarily think about that. So it's kind of by necessity, and also at the same time as you're starting to have some time open up, that you're able to explore that. Yeah, but yeah, no, I think my experience mirrors that as well. Kind of as the injury kind of became a bigger part of my headspace, and knowing that maybe baseball wasn't going to keep going for too long, like had to think about other things.
Yeah, think about other options. So when you're making that transition out of school, so you're about to graduate, you're about to walk over, or maybe probably the months leading up to that, right? So you're not right at graduation. What was the role that your athletic community kind of had in your next steps, or was that something kind of that you more found upon yourself? Like, yeah, I'm an athlete, but I kind of got to just figure it out. Tell me more about that.
Yeah, I mean, I think it was largely separate. If I'm being totally honest, there was certainly, I think certainly some paths had a lot more former baseball players and former athletes going down them, and so for
Okay.
the people that were going down those routes, there was a little bit more of kind of a natural mentorship and like alumni community within the baseball program and within kind of the athletic program in general. But for those that are kind of like more sparsely populated career paths, I
Which
think
I'm
within
assuming
that
the
group,
one you're
but
in now.
that was me. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it was definitely, again, leaning more on community that was outside of the baseball sphere. Not to say that I didn't have good conversations with some folks, and there were some people that actually had graduated just before I got there, but have still
Okay.
kind of kept in touch with, who our paths have intertwined in different ways. And so that's been nice to have someone there who kind of understood the college experience as a baseball player there, and then also kind of his career path is definitely different, but we've kind of
Okay.
intersected at different
Yeah.
times.
Yeah.
So that
When
was helpful.
so you're more, let's say, I like to say, because again, it's not my fear at all, it's like more the technical side of science, right?
Hmm.
So when did you come to find that to be one of your passions
Ooh,
while navigating your injury,
yeah.
adjusting to East Coast to West Coast, and then on top of that you have to be like, baseball might not be the end all be all for me. I can't get my elbow to walk straight, so
Yeah,
what
yeah,
else did I
yeah.
got to figure out? Tell me how'd you
Yeah,
navigate that?
I mean, for me, that was there kind of before anything, I think, was an interest in math and science. Like that was
Okay.
from a kid, that was driving me probably before an interest in baseball. Like probably
Really?
I mean, yeah,
Talk
and
about non-traditional. That's good.
and it's certainly I don't know. I mean, of all the sports, kind of baseball has a pretty high technical angle to it,
Mhm.
and just the math and stats of it plays so much into the game. I think that probably didn't hurt in terms of like drawing me towards baseball. And I actually wrote my senior thesis on like why nobody should bunt in college baseball.
Yeah, I saw something about that. So I was on LinkedIn. Yeah, tell me more about that. Because I was like, wait, what? You said nobody
Yeah,
should, but I turn on
yeah,
MLB, they're doing it all the time.
yeah. Well, I mean,
Tell me why.
actually, they stopped doing it a lot. I mean, it started to come back a little bit, but bunting went
A
away
little
for a
bit.
long time. I mean, it's
Wait,
just
yeah, tell me why.
so
I'm curious.
yeah. The short answer is I mean, bunting makes sense when it makes more and more sense to bunt when you're less and less likely to get a hit. So if it's a really pitching dominated league, if you get somebody on first base or second base, maybe you should bunt because the alternative outcome is that you're probably going to get out anyways. But if you compare like professional baseball to college, scores are higher in college. People hit more. There's metal bats. Like generally, hitters have more of an advantage than pitchers do. And so you'd think that you should bunt less because the alternative, you're more likely to get a hit if you don't bunt.
Yeah.
But at least at the time, and I can't speak to current college baseball, it was actually more common to bunt in college than in the pros. And I think there's some kind of just like, I mean, in my mind, there was some like feeling that it was like more old school and like you needed, like you didn't have, like if you didn't have quite the like skill level of a professional baseball player, like you needed to bunt more. And so there was kind of this notion of like in college, because the hitters aren't as good, we should be bunting more. But the reality was like the hitters actually have a greater advantage relative to the pitching in college. So like there was just this weird disconnect about like why
Okay.
people bunt so often. And it was around the time that like people were starting to realize that professional baseball should include fewer bunts. And so I was kind of like, well, in college it's even more of a problem.
Yeah.
So
The clear connection.
it was a fun project. You know, I didn't end up staying in anything related to baseball stats, but it was a cool application of some of the stuff I was learning.
A definite pivot. So
Did
after
not
college,
convince our coach. That was
no,
I was not able to.
he's like, all right, we're bunting again.
Yeah, he's
Ian,
like, well,
thanks.
you're
Good try.
not on the team anymore. You're hurt. This is not happening.
I always find that almost like, oh, another thing is that dynamic you have with the coach once you're graduated from the program, completely different. It's for me, like, I don't know if it's the same thing for you, but for me, I'm like, who is this guy? You know, like it's crazy. Was that similar for you or no?
I'd say different. I mean, so it was a pretty unique situation. The coach that was there when I was there actually passed away a
Oh, sorry
few
about that.
years after that. So yeah, I mean, and you know, just to be perfectly frank, like we didn't get along great. I mean, I was obviously kind of struggling to stay healthy, and
Mhm.
I think he harbored a little bit of resentment that I kind of came in injured. And at one point he told me like, "Oh, if I'd known this, like we wouldn't have recruited you." So I was like, "Oh, that's nice." So we had our tensions. I think we saw the game in a little bit of a different way. But I mean, at the end of the day, I was hurt, so I wasn't really able to play anyways.
Yeah, yes, that's how it goes sometimes.
So yeah, so we didn't have a super close relationship afterwards. A lot of the players did. I mean, he's a pretty kind of legendary figure in Harvard baseball. And a lot of my teammates had pretty close relationships to him, and I know that kind of. I mean, for all of us, it was tough to hear him pass, but for those that
Yeah.
were particularly close, I know it was a much harder thing.
Yeah, I'm so sorry about that, you know. But
Yeah.
in other things, you know, pivoting from that a little bit,
Yeah.
what was it like? I guess something I want to know. So you went back to school to get your PhD and master's from Berkeley. Shout out the Bay Area. Such a great place to live.
Go Bears.
What was that like going back to school, but you don't have that team environment?
Yeah, it was different, for sure. I mean, I guess the first thing is like grad school is super different from undergrad anyways. So, you know, I can't separate it from that. Like
Yeah, it's true.
the undergrad experience is, you know, everybody's at a different age than you go into in grad school, and you're there for kind of, you know, broader life development reasons, and for grad school, kind of you're there to learn specific stuff. So it's a different culture in general. But yeah, without the team, I did miss it a lot. I actually looked into uh, what it would be like to be like an assistant coach
Really?
with Berkeley. Yeah, yeah.
Wait,
But
because
it was
does Berkeley have baseball or no?
oh yeah, yeah.
Oh yeah, they
Yeah,
do.
they're pretty
Okay.
good.
Okay.
I
Wow.
mean,
Wow.
yeah.
So you looked into it, and then what
Shout
happened,
out
man?
former Pac-12.
Yeah, when it existed.
Yeah. Yeah, I looked into it, but I mean, it's as you might imagine, it takes a lot of time. It takes a lot of time as a player. It takes a lot of time as a coach, and you know, ultimately, I was like, I don't know if I could swing this to like be the batting practice thrower like
Yeah.
6 days a week for hours and hours. But yeah, I mean, I definitely missed some of that camaraderie, and like, there's also just something about that. I've tried to describe this a few times, but like when you're playing sports, there's this like uncertainty that comes with every game, where like you're gonna, obviously try as hard as you can, and hopefully you'll win the game, but like you never really know what the day is going to look like when you or what the game's going to look like when you start.
Yeah.
Whereas with stuff like with academic work, there's still that kind of like you don't really know where it's going to go in the end. But on a day-to-day basis, you're kind of like, all right, I'm going to wake up, I'm going to work on this thing, like I'm going to maybe go to classes, etc. You don't have that same level of just like, I don't know, competition has this like uncertainty with it that brings some anxiety. Like I was always someone that like got fairly nervous before games, but you kind of miss that when it stops happening. You're kind of like, where is that tension?
Yeah.
Where is that anxiety?
You're like, where's my
Um,
heartbeat? I can't feel it
yeah,
anymore,
yeah,
you know?
exactly. So that was something different, and obviously that's less related to school than the sports in particular. But yeah, it's just certainly like missed that community. But again, I think being in college and being hurt and kind of being forced to step outside of that athletic kind of strictly that athletic sphere, I think was quite helpful, because
Super beneficial towards
obviously
you.
doesn't last forever.
Yeah,
So
it doesn't. It doesn't. And I think that's one of the hardest things, that as athletes that you have to go through, where it's one of your childhood dreams that you did it, you play at Division
yeah.
1 level at a great school, and then you're like, okay, but life moves on and this thing isn't coming with me. So
Mhm.
after you went to Berkeley, you graduated, you spent some time, working at a couple companies, and then you ended up at BlackRock. So when you're, let's say, at a company like that, especially with the vice president role that you held, it kind of falls in line where, I don't know if you were told this, but there's this theory, and it's actually proven by numbers, where former student athletes, they go on to have really prominent roles in business, anything that they kind of get involved in. Was there ever a moment that you were kind of, and probably not, because you probably don't get these questions a lot, this is why I wanted to start the show around it, where there's certain attributes that you cultivated during your time, let's say as an athlete. Did you see that applicable to the role that you're able to hold at such a company like that?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, the thing that I think I would take with it most is the like team component of it. And I mean, obviously, we both played team sports, and so that was a
Yeah.
big part of our experience. And other athletes in college will be on play individual sports, and that'll be a different experience. But I think uh, there's such a strong pull to be, especially at a big organization, to kind of be looking out for yourself, which I think you need to do in a lot of
Okay.
ways. But
Wait,
I
so wait,
think
you're saying there is a point in looking at
there's a
yourself.
pull. No, there's like a pull to like, it's such a big organization. You're kind of like,
Yeah.
I just need to focus on me and like get
Yeah.
through this. But I think the experience of kind of playing a team sport, especially one that especially one in college that involves such kind of like, you're, again, like we talked about before, you're like living with these people, spending 75-80% of your day with this
Yeah.
with your teammates. You start to kind of realize that even if you're interested in like individual development, like it relies on everybody else, and you kind of have to navigate personalities and different backgrounds and different objectives, different like things that they're trying to get out of the experience. Like you have to manage all those things to come up with like this unit that ultimately tries to succeed together. And I think that happens a lot in kind of the professional world as well. Like everybody's coming there from different backgrounds. Some people, want to progress in that company. Some people want to like use a job to go somewhere else. Like everybody has these different reasons for being there and
Mhm.
objectives. And I think you have to figure out how to manage that together. And that was a lot like our team. People, not everybody's the same, not everybody's there for the same reasons, but like ultimately the more you can get folks on the same page and the more you can find that sort of common ground that motivates people, then you can kind of
Take it
get
from there.
everyone swimming in the same direction and make some
Yeah.
more progress. So I don't know if it's like super well defined, but I think that aspect of the athletics experience, I think, was maybe the most tangible there.
Well, that means that, like, so my theory is that this actually proves that you're living proof that, your athletic experience helps you in more of a professional world, right?
Hmm.
So in a hypothetical world, let's say baseball wasn't part of the picture, would you
Yeah.
still be at the same level that you're at today?
It's a good question.
Thanks.
uh, it'd probably be different. I don't know exactly how. So I guess the other thing that really, and this, I didn't go on to do it in college, but I alpine ski raced a lot growing up, and that was a
Okay.
big part of my life. And I think that there was some like there's a very high level of commitment that happens in that. Maybe you might argue too much for
Yeah,
like
I didn't know about that.
8-year-olds
Yeah.
that are doing it, but it just takes so much time and commitment. I think that was something that actually kind of provided a lot of just helped me learn kind of like what sort of sacrifice is not the right word, but like what sort of effort is kind of required to excel at something. Even more so than I just think it taught all of us a little bit younger than you kind of learn in other contexts. Maybe because it involves like a lot of travel. Like you got to go travel to ski places. You got to be fairly independent as a kid, and you could argue that this is a good or bad thing. Like sometimes it's like pushing that on kids a little too early. But that's an
Yeah.
aspect of my life that I think even without the baseball would be a strong driver. But that's still like there's a lot of lessons learned from athletics of some
Of
fashion.
some
So even
sort.
if it wasn't baseball, it would probably be that.
Be something else.
But yeah,
Well,
I think sports have always been a big part of my life, even just like recreationally, even now. So it's hard to imagine what it would look like without them.
yeah, exactly. And that's something I think that's so prevalent in athletes where you can't imagine your life without it. You're like, if someone asks me like, yeah, like what was your life about soccer? I'm like, wait, what do you mean? Like ask the question again. They'll say, what's your life
Yeah,
without soccer? I'm like, "Dude,
yeah.
I don't know how to answer. It's like you'd be cultivating a brand new person. So when you're in that interview, leading up to let's say that BlackRock interview, are you referring your baseball experiences at all or your alpine skiing? Tell me.
Mm,
Because they always ask some behavioral questions. They want to know, like, hey, this is a
they
functioning,
do. They
breathing human
do.
being. You get
Yeah,
along with people.
yeah. I guess my secret is that it's been a long time since I've had a real formal interview. Actually, that's not true. That's not true. But the BlackRock interview was not super formal. I was at a company that part of that company's work, their IP was sold to BlackRock, and so we
Mm,
kind of ended up there kind of through a acqui-hire type situation
okay.
where we wound up there. So that was not quite the same level of interview status. But I think honestly, both of them come up and kind of as I've talked about, they're kind of inform where I am right now in different ways. I think the ski racing, as I mentioned, like they were pretty complementary in terms of one being like a very independent sport and like you have teammates, right? You are on a team together.
Hmm.
But at the end of the day, like your success has nothing to do with the other person's success and vice versa. Um,
There it is.
so
Yeah.
there's kind of this like level of independence that helps you understand like, yeah, how your efforts can make or break what happens to you going forward. And then the baseball part wraps in like how do you manage a team? How do you I mean obviously not no individual player is managing the team. That's more the coach, but you're still trying
Except
to
if you're
figure out
like
how to get the
LeBron.
yeah, exactly. Right. Yeah. If you're like LeBron. Now if you're Brady, you're
Yeah.
doing everything. Yeah. Broadcasting,
Yeah,
running a
it's so
team.
weird. He's everywhere now. And I bet you this, LeBron is also going to go into broadcasting too. There's such
Yeah.
a pipeline where I was talking to one of my friends, the talent agent. They start recruiting people to go into broadcasting roles
Yeah.
as they're actively still in the league. If you think about, who, yeah, you're familiar with the Bay Area. You know Draymond Green, right?
Yeah.
He finished game 6 with the Houston Rockets. He lost. The next game, he's on inside inside the NBA covering the game. It's like that's
Yeah.
crazy. You
He
know what I
knows what
mean?
he's
But
doing. He knows what he's doing.
yeah,
He's
he
got his own
does.
podcast now too. And
He's
yeah.
he's everything. You never
Yeah.
know. Might see him on here. But
Yeah.
anyway, So
So they both contribute, I think, in different ways. And if I had the chance to work them both and do an interview, you gotta play on what you can. So
yeah, you can, but I'm glad to say those days are definitely way past you. When something I have to know from a personal inquiry, right? So when you're working at, say, the biggest company in the world, I know there's this lore around BlackRock owns everything, they run the world, Larry Fink is actually the king of the world. What was that experience like, entering such a, I couldn't even say conglomerate is the right word, or it probably is, but it's BlackRock. What was that experience like? And you can't say like, oh, I can't speak on it. Like, come on.
In a word, a bureaucratic, I would say is the way that I would describe it. It was a challenge, man. I was there for 2 years, and it can be, so I don't know. There's more context to that. So we ended up there. The group that I was on was trying to model risks of climate change in the financial sector, and BlackRock was really making a push to figure out how that affected their investment risk. So not doing it from like we want to do good for the world. Like they're still responsible for their investors that they're managing money for, but they were trying to say, all right, climate change is a real risk. Like how do we price that into the way we're evaluating assets? And so they hired a bunch. They bought this IP from the company I was at. A lot of us moved over there. They started up this kind of whole new division, but it's new. It's entirely new. So it's not something that management at BlackRock is familiar with managing. So we were kind of on our own, like trying to figure out the way to make it work, while simultaneously interacting with what is like very necessarily a highly regulated and bureaucratic system of operating within the company. So like we're trying to do something new, but fit it into this very structured framework that has been very successful for them and is regulated to be very specific and regimented for good reason. So yeah, it was a struggle. It's kind of like very, very challenging to make quick progress, and that happens in a big organization. But was just being perfectly honest, was one of the things that I struggled with while I was there for sure.
Well, definitely. I mean, it sounds like you were painting, the way you describe your BlackRock experience, you were painting what happened, let's say, your freshman year, in the sense that, you're in a new environment, you're kind of on your own. So again, that parallel, right? It's crazy. Like it's almost word for word describing the same experience.
And there's also kind of our cohort of people that showed up there, kind of at a similar level, sort of this like mid management, like
exactly.
early career, but like not just out of college or master's. I think we had a similar kind of like team environment there, which was really helpful. I think I would have not survived without that. I think we all kind of, in the same way that like, after practice, you can go vent to someone about like, man, why did we do that? Like, I think we should have done this differently.
Yeah.
Like, you got someone to like air some of those, you're not keeping all that stuff bottled up inside. Similarly, when you have a team kind of that is close working on a project, there was definitely some of that aligned with the team experience.
How much of the BlackRock, the BlackRock lore turned out to be true? I'm curious about that.
I would say I was like a little embarrassingly and shockingly unfamiliar with BlackRock before I started there. Like I should have. I learned a lot more about just how massive it is as I was there. I mean, it's not like I went into it just blind, but like until I found out about. I mean, we had. Anyways, the company I was at before had worked with them for a while. That's kind of how they knew about those models and ultimately decided to purchase what we were working on. But up until that point, BlackRock, Blackstone, Blackwater, I would have gotten those all mixed up. My grandma actually, when I said that I was working at BlackRock, she thought that I was working at Blackwater, the like mercenary group.
Yeah, I was gonna say the mercenary group. I was like, hey.
Yeah, she was like, that I just don't understand. Like, why have you made this decision? Like, very weird career pivot. So I guess that, yeah. So maybe it runs in the family, our lack of knowledge of BlackRock. But I don't know. I would say overall, I think when you're in something, it always appears a little bit more like real. The contours are a little bit sharper. When you're kind of sitting in the outside, BlackRock is this kind of amorphous big entity, and when you're there, you're kind of like working on specific things, and you kind of see the reasoning behind most things that you're doing, and there, it's a little bit more confined. So I would say I didn't feel that presence every day. The way I did feel the presence is just the like how much BlackRock's interaction with the public and with the government kind of affected our day to day. Like, I mean, obviously, climate risk and climate change is like unfortunately a very politicized topic these days, and that affects what BlackRock does. When you have, I mean, BlackRock manages a lot of state pension funds. They manage a lot of resources that are tied up in political spheres. Yeah. So that's one way in which I think the size like affected us on a day-to-day basis.
So were you guys ever, let's say, in some situations where you might have the best practice to implement, but it might not align with somebody's politics, and you're like, oh, there's only so much we can do?
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Yep. Wow. I mean, at the end of the day, I mean, BlackRock has the, any asset manager has a fiduciary responsibility. So they got to do what they believe is best for the clients within the constraints of what the clients want. So if a client says, I don't want you to do this, you can't do it.
You can't do it. Yeah. And when your clients control the government, then you can't do it.
Yeah.
So wow, that's whoever's watching. That's a lesson in politics, guys. It goes a long way. It goes a long way. Wow.
Hopefully no one from BlackRock is watching, and we'll see.
Yeah. Channel terminated.
Yeah.
Have people like knocking at my door.
Yeah, we'll see.
Something that also defines you is that you're a big advocate for climate change. So I was reading up. It never seems like we're headed in a good direction with climate change, if I'm being honest. What's something that I guess people now, right? Or actually, no, before we even get into that, what drew you to kind of be such an advocate on climate change, besides, maybe working for people in the government who didn't believe in it?
Yeah, I mean, that's another thing that was kind of there pretty early on, kind of as I was growing up, middle school, high school age. I think it will, I mean, obviously, I have my own opinion, but I think it's kind of the defining challenge of our time, that we don't have necessarily a good answer to. We've tried over and over again, and we kind of, it seems like we run into similar walls every time. So I think there's that aspect of it. Growing up in the Northwest, and ski racing, spent a lot of time outside, and so kind of the like environmental component called to me. And I wouldn't say I'm a specifically an environmental advocate. I think about climate change more in the lens of like societal impact and human impact than like saving the environment for the environment's sake. It's just kind of the way the lens that I approach it with. But I think kind of working on environmental problems is tied up in enjoying the outdoors and spending a lot of time outside, which was kind of a fairly big part of my childhood and is definitely a big part of my life now. So yeah, it's kind of both those things. Like it's a huge problem that we don't have a good solution for, and the kind of overall context of the problem lines up a little bit with the world that I like to inhabit outside of things that I'm doing for work, etc.
So I mean, I feel like I have to ask this question based on all the videos I've been watching. Like, how screwed are we?
Yeah, I mean, this is maybe, and I'm kind of not a card-carrying economist, but I work with a lot of economists, and that's kind of the direction my work is headed. Is I definitely don't see things as black and white. I think a lot of people will point to certain thresholds, like 1.5 degrees of warming or 2 degrees of warming, as like, if we hit this, then we've solved climate change, and if we blow past it, then the world ends.
We're all gonna die.
Right. And I mean, and the reality is that neither of those are true. There's climate impacts today that affect the world, where the world would be better off if those had not occurred. And so it's not like if we stop now, we've solved everything. But by the same token, if we get to 2.1 degrees of warming, it's very unlikely that the world will have ended. Maybe there's a small chance, but it's like highly unlikely that that's the end of things. So really, I think of things much more in like the marginal impact. So like every bit of emission, like carbon emissions that we can reduce, helps prevent some form of impacts of people around the world. So it's not that we're either screwed or we're fine. It's like we're going to be somewhere in the middle, and let's push the needle as far as we can towards the we're fine part.
Yeah.
And you know, it is by no means a linear path to success there. Like, as you can obviously see from the past 5 or 6 years, you know, it's kind of a 2 steps forward, 1 step back approach. Which, if we had infinite time, you know, would be great. But we don't. We're kind of up against a clock here. So the more we can push towards effective policy and effective investment sooner, the better off we'll be. But the reality is, like, people are complicated, and there's, you know, almost 10 billion of us, and you know, it's gonna be, we're not gonna do it right. Obviously, we haven't done it right so far. We're not gonna do it right, but how much can we minimize the damages from screwing things up?
Yeah, one thing that I guess sticks out to me when you say that, it's like almost like your ability to do your due diligence, you know? And one thing I guess that's nice about, okay, it's not nice, but I'm an optimist, right? So bear with me here, is that by the time we get to measure people's due diligence, none of us will be alive. So that's a different problem. But one thing I will say is that, so I grew up in Florida as well as California. And I want to say, when you're saying make sure that everybody kind of does their part, it's like that's the most California answer you could have done. Because when I went there from Florida, everybody's so conscious about that. But again, we are all humans and we're part of a large society. So when it comes to, again, everybody in California is driving electric cars and doing all that stuff, when coming from people from Florida, they don't really care about that stuff, right? And that still weighs on the universal, I guess, climate change impact. Is there anything besides, let's say, a due diligence perspective, unless you're at a company maybe like a BlackRock that has direct political ties, that you can do to kind of help shape the future in that way? Or is it kind of out of our hands?
Yeah, no, certainly not out of our hands.
Okay.
If it was, yeah, I'd probably stop doing what I was doing. But I mean, not to bring it back too much to you know, force the analogy to the sports athletics experience too much, but
No, please do. Please do. Force it all
that's
the
why
way,
we're here,
man.
right?
That's what
why
you're
we're
here for. Force it.
No, I kind of, as you were asking that question, I was thinking about some of the stuff we talked about so far, and how it kind of shapes my climate advocacy, or just climate, like, way that I engage with climate action. I'd say I'm on the spectrum of people that are interested in climate change, from the like uber progressive, like we cannot engage with anybody who's been involved with fossil fuels at any point in their lifetime, or any companies that have anything to do with fossil fuels, because they are evil. Like, they will always lie to us, and they can't be trusted. To the other side, where it's just like, we need to involve everybody. Like, this is a global problem. Like, if we need to make compromises so we can get everybody on board. I think I'm definitely much more towards that side. Everything's a spectrum, like somewhere in the middle. I think you can't compromise on some fundamental issues, but I really do think that regardless of what any individual believes is the right action, like, we're not going to be able to take it unless you get more people on board. So it's more like a practical problem than a ideological problem. And so I think there's that component when we, this is a very long-winded tie-in to,
No, keep going.
to sports, but like, when we talked about that team perspective of like, how do you make success with a team, you don't need, you know, for a baseball team, you don't need 9 players with the same skill set to make that team. You need everybody recognizing, like, what is the best way that I can contribute to the overall objective that this team is trying to get to. And so similarly, and again, like some of your teammates are going to come in with different backgrounds, with different objectives, with different reasons for being there, and you try and find like what is the thing that unites us that will help us as a team get to our team objective best, even with all these individuals. And I think the same thing as anyone is trying to figure out how do you engage with climate action and like climate advocacy, it's a good place to start is like, what are the touch points with everybody in my sphere that we can use to help understand, to help make progress towards this problem in a similar way, even if the reasons for doing so might be different, even if our backgrounds might be different, even if, one person is there because they think they can make money from renewable energy, or they think they can make money in the stock market by betting on this stuff. Another person is there because they want to protect the polar bears. Another person is there because they're worried about vulnerable, like low-lying island countries that are going to be swallowed up by sea level rise. Another person is there because they have political aspirations and they want to like become mayor or governor. Like everybody has these different perspectives or different reasons, personal reasons they want to do something. But like, how can you figure out what are the common ties to reach out to people in your community to kind of increase the sphere of influence that you have as an individual?
Wow. That was a long-winded answer, but that was actually perfect. It was. No, it was really good because you bring to the table this team element that people can kind of start utilizing like today, where you're reaching out to your community, you're reaching out to people in your neighborhood and figuring out your role within the team that I guess that you are in your area. So given that, from a work perspective, that you're directly on that team, that's how you make a living. What's your role, I guess, in a day-to-day perspective on all things climate change? I'm curious about that.
Yeah, you mean right now with where I'm at
right
now?
now.
Yeah.
Besides this carbon-free call.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, so work-wise, I work at a startup called Reask, and we model risk of extreme weather events, or extreme events in general. So we mostly focus on tropical cyclones, which are when they happen in the Atlantic and they affect the U.S. Assuming most people here are tuning in from the U.S., they're called hurricanes.
Yeah, shout out
but
Florida.
Same phenomenon, exactly. Yeah, you're familiar.
Yeah.
So that's our bread and butter is understanding hurricane risk. And there's a few folks out there that do it. One of the things that we specialize in is trying to understand how that risk is affected by climate variability. So that means both kind of trends in climate that are driven by humans, so that's climate change, but also just year to year variations. One year might be hotter, one year might be colder. We call that like interannual variability. So how do we incorporate that sort of information into better understanding what the risk might be? Whereas the common way to do this is to kind of like look back in the past and say, oh, over the past 100 years, this type of event has happened, 3 times. So that's what we're gonna assume it happens 3 times every 100 years. We try and get a little bit deeper and say, all right, well, it happened 3 times, but in each of those times, we happen to have a really warm sea surface temperature in the Atlantic. And so this current year actually looks like those times. So it's more likely to happen this year than it would last year or something like that. So that's kind of how do we translate our understanding of climate change into the ability for people to manage risk better, whether that means from a financial perspective, like we have a lot of insurance clients, or whether it's like a preparedness perspective, and like if there's a storm coming, like what are the chances that something is that a certain threshold is going to be exceeded? Should we evacuate people, etc.?
Wow. Does that mean like what the weather channels are always ringing your line? Like what analysis you got for us, or kind of a little bit more far out?
Would hope so. It's usually a little bit. It's usually not quite as public facing. Usually,
okay.
I mean, it's usually an organization, institution, agency that's interested in these risks, or in large part the insurance market. Like that's one of the things I think. Insurance is not going to solve climate change by any means, but it's kind of one of the most obvious ways to embed knowledge about climate change into financial decision making.
Wow. I just made that connection right now, and I was like, wow, like, because again, an insurance company can kind of set the standard for what you can expect. That's why a rate might be so high. That's so cool. Wow. So yeah, you're like directly affecting everybody, but in a good way. So
Yeah,
kudos
good
to you
way.
for
Yeah,
that.
yeah.
And yeah, in a good way.
People
Yeah, in a
always say,
really,
"Oh,
really good
are you
way.
the reason our fire insurance disappeared in California?" And no, we're trying to be the reason that your fire insurance will not disappear, though it may get more expensive to reflect the true risk of these events.
Of the world that you live in. So
Yeah.
before we wrap up here, I want to know, sports has been a central figure in your life, as we talked about here.
Yeah.
What's the active role that sports plays in your life here now?
It's shifted in the type of sports
Okay.
a lot. Yeah, it's moved from it's kind of hard to play a pickup game of baseball, especially as your shoulder and elbow are wrecked from years of doing it. But no, we live in Truckee, California, which is like a really beautiful mountainous place. Skiing, which obviously was a big part of my childhood, is a big part of my life now. And the ability to get outside more than anything, I think that sports offers an opportunity to get outside for me now and to kind of have a way to recharge from day-to-day work challenges and life challenges, which I think we all need. And even though everything now, for the most part, is kind of quote unquote individual sports, skiing, biking, running, variety of other things, it's still focused around a community. Like you typically do those things with someone else. Like I'm usually going for a bike ride with someone, usually going skiing with someone. So it's still kind of like part of that community building component. Like sports facilitate that. And I think certainly living in a place like I do, my community would be a lot smaller if I didn't participate in those. So it's a very useful thing to have to keep making those connections.
Well, that's good. I mean, you're still really, really active. So, like I said, what I'm doing with these series is that drawing the connection between sports and kind of business success that you guys, again, you've gone on to do some really, really impressive things. And I think there's definitely a community that needs to benefit from that as well. Like somebody that's recently graduated, the whole thing was that you say that you're going to go on to be really successful. I just heard you do exactly that. And again, through more of these conversations, people don't need to feel as lost as they do kind of coming out of sports, right? Being an athlete, saying like, man, I'm going to be successful. I have no idea how. I actually don't even have a network that I could tap into besides just the people at my school, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so thank you so much for taking the time to be on the show. I hope you enjoyed it. And what's your crazy hot sport take? So I'll give you an example. Mine is that LeBron's not going to retire until he's 50 years old. Everybody disagrees with that. But that's how I'll start my conversation if I was to guess. But I'm not. So hit me with yours. I'm curious. And this is for the next guest that's going to come on the show.
What's my hot take?
Give me your hot take.
It's not that hot anymore, but we should have robo umps. We should have umpires in baseball that are just like, it's a strike, it's a ball. Like we don't need this garbage that we get of bad calls affecting games. I know it's a part of the game. I know people love it, but maybe it's the statistician and math person in me. It's like we got the right answer here. Why do we have to pretend that we don't have the right answer?
Well, based on your reaction when you said, I don't know if people will like this, it's definitely a hot take, and I know a lot of people disagree with you. So thank you for sharing. Ian, thank you so much for being on the show. I really enjoyed our conversation. I hope you enjoyed it. And
likewise.
I'll talk to you soon, man.
Yeah, thanks for the conversation.
Of course, man. All right, you take care.
See ya.
So there you have it. Second ever episode of Live with Ty, former vice president at BlackRock. What a conversation, guys. I enjoyed it so much. Again, I love learning about people. I love telling their story and bridging that connection. For the audience there watching, there you have some of the steps to take if you're nervous or if you're confused or you don't really know what you're doing. That's okay. He felt the exact same way. And look where he ended up. I mean, he's living his best life in Truckee. He's working at a startup. He's one of the founders of that startup. I mean, he is doing some insane stuff, and it comes from that athletic background. What I'll ask of you guys, besides liking, besides following, besides subscribing, which if you got to this point of the video, you should already be doing that. I mean, come on here. All we're doing is entertaining and spewing knowledge for you guys. That's all we want to do. Spew knowledge for you guys. Is that you'll share this episode with somebody who needs to hear it. It could be somebody that's lost. It could be somebody that's confused, somebody that really wants some guidance, some perspective, or somebody that you'll share this episode with somebody who really needs to hear this conversation. That's my ask. It could be somebody who's lost. It could be somebody who's confused, or somebody who just wants to hear me yap and hear an engaging conversation that's sports adjacent, right? Again, we're here to tell the stories of interesting people from all walks of life. Right now, we're focusing on athletes. But again, that's not the only people that you're going to see on the show. But share this with somebody who wants to be inspired, who wants some more perspective, and generally who wants to hear a good story and know skills and tactics that they can apply to their life right now. Thank you so much for tuning in. That was episode 2 of Live with Ty series. I hope you guys enjoy. Let me know who you want on the show next in the comments. Let me know what you liked and didn't like about the show. Again, we're open to all feedback. Make sure to follow us on all platforms. So that's LinkedIn, TikTok, Spotify, Apple Podcast, and the other social platform that's soon to be created that doesn't exist yet. Follow us on all of those. Get connected with our community. Let me know who else you guys want to hear from on the story, and I'll reach out and I'll be sure to make it happen. Once again, this is episode 2 of the digital series, episode 23 in totality of the Live with Ty series. Once again, I'm your host, Tyler Johnson, and this was Live with Ty. Take care.